Hey, Mike Ryan here with Canadian Musician Magazine, right now in the Chorus Entertainment Building downtown Toronto, and it's my absolute pleasure to have with me Lauv, multi-platinum selling, streaming, pop-oriented singer, songwriter, producer. Prior to being a performing artist outright in yourself, you're also an immensely talented, immensely successful songwriter, writing for a hugely diverse group of people, from Charli XCX to Celine, Dion. It's crazy what you've done in a quick amount of time, man, but appreciate you making a few minutes. How you been?
Of course. I've been good, you know. I'm really excited. My album comes out in like a month, so I'm excited.
Absolutely, man. And I wish we had more time in the sense, and no offense to you over there, Sam. Lauv's absolutely fabulous publicist.
I'll be here all day.
There's so much I wish we could talk about, but I want to start obviously with the new album, and in particular, especially in this current streaming paradigm we're in, the new album out March 6th, I should mention, called How I'm Feeling. You call this your debut LP, but you did have a project out prior to this that you called a playlist, and I apologize, I don't have notes in front of me. It's escaping my the playlist album.
No, it's all good. Yeah, it's called I Met You When I Was 18.
Yes. Met You When I'm 18. In this streaming paradigm, what separates a LP per se from that project, which you called a playlist, even though, nowadays it kind of presents as a very similar thing?
No, I feel you. I mean, for me, the big thing was I wanted to call it an album, the How I'm Feeling project, because the last project was very much only one dimension of who I am. Yeah. And the whole thing with this album was embracing every part of my identity and every part of who I am as an artist. And I feel like it's the first time that I'm actually kind of confidently going out there and being like, this is me in its entirety. So, nice. Yeah.
In that case, when it came time when you started writing for this album, were you consciously saying, all right, I am now writing for my debut LP? Was it a consciously, artistically different thing that when you'd been doing prior to that?
For sure, yeah. I knew I wanted to make an album. I had no idea how I was going to make it. I mean, for the first few months, I was like, I don't know if I'll ever make this album. I actually got a tattoo to kind of like make a promise to myself that I would do it. It's a little number 2. Even though it's my first album, to me it was like the second, project of mine. So it was sort of like, I have to see this through. Yeah. And yeah, it was a crazy process, but it was great.
Once again, you have like a slew of collaborators on this album. K-pop supergroup BTS, it'll be your second collaboration with them, as well as Canadian star Alessia Cara with the very fittingly titled song Canada. Yes. For you, and you've done, like I say, you've written for others, you've written for yourself, you've collaborated obviously a lot on this album. In terms of the collaborations versus the songs that are just you, or it's just your name on it, how does that differ in the songwriting process? Are you approaching it in a mentally or emotionally different way, or even just in a structurally different way?
Yeah, I feel like there's certain songs in the album, like Drugs and the Internet. There's a song called Modern Loneliness, which is the last track. There's some that I just felt like needed to be 100% me in terms of the story. But there's some that I just felt like either I wrote them with another artist, or I felt like when I was making them, there was just another perspective that it could use. Mm-hmm. And, I feel like sometimes there's this thing where artists have, like, pride. They're like, I won't do a collab, especially on my first album. But, I'm out here just trying to make the best music I can make and have the most fun I can. And so I've just really started to enjoy collabs, so, yeah.
The Alessia Cara track, how did it come about? But, it's fittingly titled Canada. Yeah. I'm very curious. It's not one of the songs. I believe 9 songs from the album have come out in some form or another so far. That's not one of them, so I'm very curious to hear it. But was it really just a duo partnership? Were you guys sitting down? Can you tell me kind of how that song took shape? For
sure. That was a really funny one because it came from actually a Twitter screenshot. Someone I was dating at the time sent me this screenshot of a trending topic that said, studies show if you're looking for the best quality of life, you should move to Canada. Okay. And so I was kind of like in this place where I was like falling deeply in love, and I wanted to write a song kind of about escapism, and so I wrote a song that was like why don't we move to Canada? And it was just like based on the screenshot. And then, after I had gotten to a certain point in the demo, I was looking for another perspective, and then me and Alessia had met somewhat recently. Yeah. And I just reached out to her, sent her the demo, and then we FaceTimed, and she loved it, and then she sent her part, and it was perfect, so it's cool, yeah.
How's it, to compare that to, say, the BTS collaborations, and they're part of that K-pop machine, not to mention there's like what, like 5-6 guys in the group, and truthfully I don't know if they do any of their own writing or that kind of thing. But for you, being a professional songwriter as well as a producer, how does that BTS or, you know, within that K-pop realm, collaborating within that realm, differ? Are you writing the song and bringing it to them and then you're kind of figuring out who does what, or are they really part of the writing process? It's
been different, you know. So when they asked me to do the remix version of their song "Make It Right," yeah. And that one was very much like collaborative in the sense that they you know, obviously they already had a version of that song that was done that they had written, and I was then asked to kind of to take the interpretation of what the message of the song was, and kind of make my own version of it. So that was really cool. And then you know, the other one that's on my album, "Who" is the name of the song, I had kind of made an early version with some of my friends and then sent it to them, and you know, kind of there wasn't, you know, much particular direction. It was kind of like just wanted them to do their thing, and then yeah, and then they just destroyed it. It was amazing. They killed it.
Nice. All that time you spent, and tell me, like, how many years was it that you were writing for others and also being a producer and composer, beat maker, and that kind of stuff before you became a performing artist?
It's a hard question. Let me think. I started writing songs when I was 13, and then I didn't even know you could produce and write for other artists. Like, I didn't know that was even a thing at that age. So I kind of started playing in bands for, you know, a lot of middle school and high school. And we would book our own tours, and it was the MySpace era, and like just doing all that kind of self-promotion stuff. Yeah. And then I think when I turned like 18, I kind of got frustrated because none of it was working out. So that's when I made the decision to be like, okay, I'm going to stop trying to be an artist, and I'm going to try to write and produce for other artists. Yeah. And then so I spent maybe 2 years just doing that. And then I made my first song as Lauv in 2015. And then from there, you know, I was kind of 50-50, like trying to write for other people and trying to do my own thing. Yeah. But it wasn't until I put I Like Me Better out that was like the big shift where I was like, this is really what I want to do, is focus on being an artist. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think, because you've really hit the ground running, like I said, you have, you know, over 1 billion streams, you know, between your singles, you know, How I Met You when I was 18, I think alone that collection has racked up over 1 billion streams. Like, you've had immense success right off the bat. Do you think you would have come out as such a fully formed artist had you not had those years behind the scenes writing and producing? I find it hard to believe that would be the case. So I guess more specifically, the question should be, like, what did you learn writing for others, producing for others, and having that craft experience before becoming a performing artist that allowed you to do what you're doing now?
That's a really good question. I feel like the process was so important for me, because I went from trying to write songs that I thought people wanted to hear, or I thought that people would want to sing, to then finally just writing my own story. And it took me a long time to realize that that was what it was about, you know? I think I was so focused on just wanting to be a musician and just wanting to be an artist, but not really being ready to be vulnerable enough to share my own story. And so I think it took me a lot of time to get to the point where I was like, okay, I'm gonna be vulnerable about what I'm going through, and hopefully people like it. So I think I had to go through a long kind of period to get there.
Even when you're being more vulnerable and you're writing from a much more personal perspective, do you still have it in your head? You're like, all right, I know this is how a song needs to be crafted in a more technical sense in order to touch people the way I want it to touch. There's one thing about sharing the emotion, but it's another thing about getting people to identify with that emotion. And there is a very technical thing that comes into doing that well, which obviously you have. So were you consciously kind of melding those two skill sets and those two intentions?
For sure. You know, I think I've grown to learn that, first of all, I'm interested in creating music that is obviously very personal, but that also has the potential to unite a lot of people. Because I think that's the special thing about, you know, a hit song, for example, is you can go into a stadium full of people and they could be all their own, you know, life stories, so many different experiences, but there's something about a single song that everybody can click into and be like, I can relate to that in my own way. And I think that's so special, because the world needs especially today, it needs way more connection, like real connection. And so I think that's something that's always been really interesting to me. And so I think when I'm writing songs, I'm trying to find the balance between being as personal and self-expressive as I can, but also I think just trying to write in a way that's not overthought, because I think our natural instincts are the things that connect with people, you know, at least for me as a songwriter. So every time I start thinking a lot, that's when it gets a little, I don't know, too esoteric and like not easy to connect with. Yeah.
Are you ever trying to make it, you know, when you're writing a song, like I heard you saying to our friend Rudy just before this about, you know, the lead single from the new album Tattoos Together, and came from a very, you know, first person personal experience. Are you ever trying to kind of take that and be like, all right, how do I make this more universal? Or is it just like, I'm writing this for me and hopefully other people get it?
I think usually it's more for me. Like I feel like I don't think about like, are other people gonna connect to it? But I think that I just tend to usually write songs that at least something about the emotion people can connect to, if that makes sense. Yeah, because I'm never really thinking about, is this story, are people gonna like really like, have they been through the same thing? Because obviously not everybody has tattoos. Most people probably don't have tattoos. But I think, you know, to me, the thing about that song is this emotion of impulsivity, of about being so in love that you'll do something impulsive for them. Yeah.
Fascinating. I guess it kind of ties in with the foundation. You started the Blue Boy Foundation, I believe it's called, which is, you know, out there. Check it out, obviously. You're trying to kind of make awareness and information more open to young people about mental health. And it's obviously a very pertinent topic now. You know, should have always been a pertinent topic, obviously, but, you know, it's very much in the public conversation now. It's something that personally I've written about and had many more conversations about in recent months. And that, so I think from a, you know, and what I was reporting on and writing about was, you know, the mental health crisis among musicians, professional musicians specifically. I know what you're doing is really helping the more general public, but having that experience as a professional musician, how do you think the industry is supporting musicians right now in terms of mental health, and how could or should it change to better do that?
It's hard, you know. I mean, you see people, I don't want to say left and right, you know, passing away, but it is happening. I think that there is a lot of pressure on artists, and I think it's fair because, you know, the people who aren't actually in the driver's seat being the artist can't necessarily relate to all of the personal pressures, the pressures on your soul as a person and your ego, and, you know, being judged all the time. That really somebody, you know, everybody on my team works really hard, right? Like my managers work really hard, like every single person on my team works really hard, but being the one who's actually constantly putting themselves out there and being in the spotlight, I think that's the difference, you know. And then there's so much, even if the pressure, you know, whether or not it's even real, you put so much more on yourself. So I think, you know, it's important that, you know, more and more, there are more and more resources and, you know, stuff like Music Cares, and, you know, I think that more and more artists, there's been a lot less of a stigma around artists and people that I know going to see therapists and doing stuff like that, which is really special. But it's, you know, it's sad that people, there's been some, you know, negative things that have had to happen for people to be more aware of it, you know. But, you know, especially on my team, like they've been really supportive, you know, especially this year. I kind of made some decisions where I want to spend more time on the things like my foundation and focusing on my writing and focusing on the shows, and maybe a little bit less time doing every single interview and every single promo opportunity and flying around, because I got to take care of myself, and they've been really understanding, so I'm really appreciative of that.
Do you think young artists now, because of the public conversation that's been going on, are better equipped to, I guess, I don't even know what the right word is, but just be stronger in the sense of saying, no, I have to do what's right for me, like it sounds like you're doing? Are younger artists better equipped to do that, and is the industry more open to saying, you know, working with them in that regard?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I can't speak to being an artist who is just starting, but I would imagine that these examples of what's going on is impacting, you know, the amount of pressure that is being placed on artists in a good way, where there's probably less pressure being placed because people are realizing, I mean, they're not going to have the lives of these people, and they're not going to have the art if people don't, you know, if they're not careful. So I'd like to think so.
Nice. And sorry to jump around a bit here, but I kind of go back to the songwriting thing for a second, or actually kind of two parts to it, because part of what you said when you were talking about your own history and how you were a performing artist before kind of jumping into the behind the scenes songwriter producer thing. One of the things that's kind of fascinated me in, you know, recent years, you're starting to see more artists who haven't done what you did to some degree, and kind of doing the dive bar thing, the playing to empty bars thing. You know, they're making music more in a more solitary fashion and putting it online and generating buzz online. And you start to see people who, like Lord initially, or Daniel Caesar, who are great artists, but they're great recording artists who are generating a lot of buzz and a lot of demand. And their first shows, all of a sudden they're playing to a sold out venue and kind of having to learn to be a performing artist at the same time. There hasn't been that natural progression that you traditionally would have seen of playing empty bars and then building up an audience like that. Even though there was that gap for you when you made that jump, how was that experience? Were you still leaning on that previous experience of playing dive bars? Even now, all of a sudden you had buzz?
I think so. I mean, I can't lie. I think part of me would have loved the idea of just letting the music do its thing, and then all of a sudden being like, here's my first tour and we're playing crazy shows. But I don't think I would have been ready by any means, because I think I had a lot of self-confidence to build, and I had a lot of comfortability and a lot of getting out of my head that I had to experience through playing a lot of the smaller shows and doing all that touring. But I mean, yeah, I think that must be pretty nice to kind of come out the gates and be like, bam, my first show, you know, playing to a few thousand people right off the bat, you know? Yeah.
For you, and just because you're back, I'm very fascinated by you as a songwriter, especially. When you're writing, we've talked a bunch about, you know, the various forms of collaborations you have, but to go back to the more solitary songs, because you have that production background, how does a song generally come together for you? Are you writing it? Are you writing the lyrics, the melody first, and then forming and then composing around it, or is it essentially coming around the opposite way?
It's honestly every song on the album has been different. You know, there's songs like "Lonely," for example. That one was the beat started first. I made it kind of half on an airplane and half in an airport, and I just downloaded Ableton. And I was just like, not to nerd out, but then it was like the first beat that I made.
Nerding out's what our people like.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just downloaded Ableton. It was like the first beat I tried to make, because I was very much a Logic boy, and I still am. But, and then from there, I went back home, and me and my friends wrote the song around that. But there's a song on my album that's called Modern Loneliness, for example, that was all written on like piano. Yeah. And then from there, it took actually months to get the production right. And it's like, honestly, it's my favorite song on the album. It means the most to me, and I think the production is so different for me and so much classier, if I can say. Okay. So yeah, each song's really different. It's nice when it all comes together at once, you know, of course, because then you just move on. But sometimes a song, it's just hard to figure out exactly the right way to kind of dress it, I guess.
It's funny, I always hear different takes on that, where some people, it's like, you know, the best songs are the ones that come together in 15 minutes, and other people labor over something for months or even years before they reach it. I guess, like, you know, an obvious classic example would be like, you know, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, which reportedly took years and years to make, and then, you know, became this masterpiece that a million people have covered. For you, does it seem to follow a pattern? Does something separate the ones that come quickly versus the ones you really have to work for?
Usually, at least the meat of the song comes really quickly if it's a great song for me. Yeah, like it's not always that the whole song is done, but at least, like, I find that my best songs, at least they're mostly written within like an hour or so, maybe a couple of hours, and then maybe I go back and make a couple tweaks. Or sometimes I think I have to make some tweaks, and I spend another couple hours one day, and then I'm like, nah, it's not as good as the way it was before. But yeah, I find the faster ones are typically better for me. Yeah.
Who were you working with as far as producer on the album?
On the album, it's actually mostly just a couple friends. You know, some of the songs are just myself. I worked. Actually, shout out to one of my friends, Johnny Simpson, who came up with John Bellion. He's an amazing producer. John Bellion worked on a song. One of my friends, Dallas K. I love working with him. I worked with Mike Elizondo. But yeah, I mean, every song in some way I touch in the production, and some of them are 100% produced by me too. So
that's kind of good segue for where I was kind of going with this. And maybe it's a bit different because the producers were also existing friends of yours. But, you know, having a production background and being a producer yourself, is your relationship with a producer in the studio fundamentally different than what they would probably experience with most artists?
I think so. I'm probably a little bit more annoying, probably a little bit more particular. Yeah, that's probably it. I'm probably just more annoying about it, because I know, I analyze, you know, I know the sounds they're using, I know what they're doing, and sometimes I'm like, no, do it this way. But I found, you know, there's certain producers, like, for example, the song I did with BTS on my album, it's called Who. My friend Dallas K did that, and honestly, other than playing like the guitar part, he knew exactly what to do, and I just kind of, it was just a great process. So it just depends. Yeah.
Nice. And I said the folks that will watch and listen and read what we do at Canadian Musician like to nerd out. So the textures on your album are beautiful. The production on it's beautiful. The timbre on it's beautiful. Like, did you have? Well, I guess you and your co-producers. Was there any bits of plugins, outboard gear, essentially certain things adding texture to the album in the studio that you guys were really leaning on?
Oh man, I'm pretty simple. Like my vocal processing is very simple every time. I don't use a lot of outboard gear. I mean, there's a couple synths. Like I use like a Juno 101, I believe. That's a synth, right? Yeah. I always forget the specific ones. Yeah. You're right, yeah. And then like a Prophet. But then other than that, like I have a Chandler Red microphone. I swear by that thing. I think it's pretty expensive, but it's an amazing microphone, tube mic. Straight into my Apollo. I don't really use any particular preamps or anything like that. DI guitars for the most part. And either just straight into Logic or straight into Ableton. Yeah, pretty simple.
Nice. Well, man, sadly we need to wrap up, I know, here in a minute, but I think you have some Canadian shows coming up this summer. The full album is out March 6th, but what's your plan over the coming months? Where can people check out more from you and see it all live?
Yeah, pretty much everywhere. Lauv songs, LAUV songs, all my socials, my website. Yeah, and I'm coming back here and I'm going to be playing all over the world, so I'm excited.
You have a cool thing going on and a pretty damn impressive career happening so quickly. So it's what I've heard of the album's beautiful. I can't wait to hear the whole thing, and just congrats on what you're doing, man.
Sweet. Got it. Great. That was a good question.
No, thank you, man.